Hello everyone, Tactical Glitch here. Today we're doing something a little different and we'll be doing double cast. Basically, I had a New Year's faction wars earlier and unfortunately due to time constraint and more turn out than expected, I was not able to cast all the games. So I have 2 remaining Vampire Coast replays and 2 remaining Kislev replays that I can cast. So I'll be bundling them up and doing double cast according to the factions. We'll start with the Vampire Coast first, and over here we have Twist playing as Vampire Coast versus Big Cat True playing as the Skavens. For the Vampire Coast army build, a front line of deckhand mobs mixed in with pistol mobs, a second line of handgun mobs, and a third line of artillery double carronades flanking a Shade Wraith gunners. Their discourage effect of minus 16 leadership is really useful against the low leadership Skaven. Protecting them is a ton of animated hulks and a couple of scurvy dogs. Leading the army is a Vampire Fleet Admiral with Fate of Buna to delete enemy weapons teams and Doom and Darkness to nuke enemy leadership even further. Combining with the Shade Wraith Gunner, that is a minus 32 leadership debuff. Lamprey's Revenge on the right flank, either holding down the flank or just crushing enemy units by pushing up. As for the Skaven army here, a whole line of Skaven slaves, some with spears, some without, guarding the Warlock Jezzails, one of them, the Natty Boobo sharpshooter in the middle. Guarding the backline is a bunch of Rat Ogres and a couple Doomflayers, one of them, the Regiment of Renowned Dwarfling Menace, and outside of the box, Gutter Runner plus Night Runners for some skirmishing firepower. Leading the army is a Kick Claw on foot with only Flancing Rune, Unlimited Power, and Brass Orb. Already, with the Carronade having that range advantage, the Warlock Jezzails are getting crushed by massive cannonballs. On top of that, the Vampire Coast, I assume they have some funds left over. They just dumped everything else into the Carronades here, giving them extra chevrons for the extra reload speed and accuracy. They're just hammering those poor Skavens from afar, as the Warlock Jezzails aren't even close enough to start firing at the Carronades just yet. Shade Wraith Gunners are lighting up those Skaven slaves as well, and you can see with the leadership debuff and the missiles pounding them in the face, their unit flag already flashing white after a couple volleys, and the Skaven slaves are considering to rout. Plus a Doom and Darkness, yeah, they are certainly going out now, being forced into the first rout of the game. Maybe? Almost? Why are you not routing with 0 leadership? Come on, just go. But yeah, anyways, the Warlock Jezzails are taking heavy damage from the enemy Carronades. One of them has routed, and also the Skaven Slaves have routed as well. Brass Orb onto the pistol mobs, not doing a whole lot of damage in terms of value, but certainly disrupting their shooting and lowering their HP. The rest of the Skaven melee units are moving up, but they're getting absolutely hammered by enemy missiles. All kinds of pistols, handguns, carronades, and even some Shade Wraith Gunners are shooting at them, and the Vampire Coast should be able to dissuade these Skavens from charging and turn tail and run instead. Other than that, the Vampire Fleet Admiral has been getting sniped from the Natty Boobo sharpshooter here, down to the last quarter of their HP already, and a Flancing Rune upgraded version. Yeah, he is going down. There's no coming back from that, especially Vampire Coast did not bring any of their healing spells. Now, the Scurvy Dogs on the right flank and the Lamprey's Revenge are pushing up, driving back the enemy Night Runners. Deploying the Night Runners on the same side of the battlefield might have been a minor mistake here, as the Night Runners and Gutter Runners could have been deployed on the corner of the battlefield and just start rushing at the enemy backline ASAP, jumping into melee and disrupt them in melee. But alas, that is unfortunate for the Skavens that the Night Runners and Gutter Runners have been driven back for now. Red Ogres and Doomflayers are trying to just pin down the Lamprey's Revenge, but that is an overblobbing of units for sure. Too much resources are invested onto the Lamprey's Revenge, and the rest of the Skaven's front line are just crumbling. Even Ikit himself is running for his life. Looks like the Shade Wraith Gunners and the handgun mobs have turned their attention to Ikit. And even if he's on foot, the handguns and the Shade Wraith Gunners still have good enough accuracy to land some consistent hits. The Jezzails might have sniped out the Admiral, but the Vampire Coast are returning the favor with their own long-range gunners sniping out Ikit. Now, the Rat Ogres and Skaven Slaves who are too busy fighting the Lamprey's Revenge are certainly regretting it, as they were exposed to the crossfire of the pistols and handguns, taking substantial damage. Skaven Slaves already routing, Night Runners and Gutter Runners doing minor damage to the Lamprey's Revenge, but they do have the numbers, so that damage will add up and slowly whittle down the health of Lamprey's Revenge, especially with the Natty Boobos still sniping out these Lamprey's Revenge as well, doing the majority of the heavy lifting so far, as both of the Jezzails are knocked out and all the Skaven frontline have been pushed back by the pistols and handguns. So it is pretty much just the Natty Boobos, the Red Ogres, who are trying to carry the game. Now, with all the Night Runners, Gutter Runners moving in, the Lamprey's Revenge has taken significant amount of damage and are trying to retreat to the safety behind their gun lines, pushing up the pistols and handguns, ready to counterfire at the advancing Skaven skirmishers. On the other side of the battlefield, the Warlock Giselles have been shattered. Perhaps some Scurvy Dogs jumped onto them and finished them off, and now they're just moving away from the pursuing Skavens trying to get to safety. Now the Vampire Coast have completely secured their gun line, sitting back safely and lighting up those closing in Night Runners and Gutter Runners. Balance of power is in their favor, and they have the majority of their firepower intact, unlike the Skavens, while the Skaven frontline trying to push up into enemy melee units. But the problem is that they're just getting shot to bits by all those handguns and pistols before they can even get close. 90 Bubble Sharpshooter has certainly earned back some solid damage value, 2,400 gold worth of damage value, but the problem is that their melee units aren't carrying their own weight. Red Ogres are now exposed to Shade Wraith Gunner Fire, and the handguns and pistols, wait, no pistols, just handguns, are shooting them to bits. The pistols are getting hammered by these melee charge, but that is a sacrifice that Twist is completely willing to make just to buy more time for the gunners to shoot. After all, they are just chaff. Now the Natty Bubbles are turning around to shoot at the Shade Wraith Gunners, but contrary to their Warpstone ammo, the Natty Bubbles actually don't do any magic damage. So the physical resistance of all these Shade Wraith Gunners are just absorbing all those AP fire and just buying more time for the animated hulks and any melee units remaining on the Vampire Coast side to charge in from reserve and pin down the Red Ogre and the Dwarfing Menace push. And that means these Red Ogres and Doomflayers stranded in front of crossfire of the Vampire Coast will be shot to death, and that will be GG. That will be victory to the Vampire Coast as the Skaven army forfeits the game. A quick rundown of damage value, and you can see that the Carronades definitely do some solid work here, sniping out the enemy Giselle teams and also just doing some really good damage from afar against Doomflayers, against Red Ogres and whatnot. Shade Wraith Gunner is one of the MVP of the game here, using the Discourage effect to force those Skavens into rout, and because they have routed multiple times, they are being shattered afterwards. And then we have the handguns, pistols, shooting up all those Skaven slaves as they try to close in, unable to do any disruption to the enemy missiles, while the Animator Hulks mostly there just to guard against the enemy Red Ogres and pin them down, or just push up and drive back the enemy melee troops. Unfortunately, the Vampire Fleet Admiral was the first one to go due to the Natty Bubble sniper fire, but that was not enough of a handicap for the Vampire Coast, as they were able to shoot their way to victory, outshooting the Skavens in pretty much any engagement, as long as they can see their targets. Natty Bubbles was untargeted for pretty much the whole game because they have stock and snipe, so they do not reveal themselves from shooting, so they were able to just sit back and safely pepper down the enemy units with their pinpoint accuracy, getting almost 3,000 gold worth of damage value. But the problem is that the melee units and the rest of the Giselles here did not quite carry their own weight, not able to earn back their own worth here, as they were just outgunned by the Vampire Coast significantly. AK also got shot up, so he didn't do much either in the battle. GG to Twist and Big Cat True or Kita here, and now let us go into the second battle. Second battle, Twist of course is still playing Vampire Coast, but this time his opponent is Sipa playing as the Lizardman. Now for the Vampire Coast gun line, a front line of melee mobs, pole arms and non-pole arms variant mixed in together, second line of bomber mobs, third line of handguns, fourth line of carronades protected by a ton of monsters, Rotting Prometheans, Animated Hulks, Lamprey's Revenge, leading the army Celestra, Dariafin, spotting those firing Umbro Tide here. Umbro Tide probably want to get out of there because they need to go back into stock, otherwise they would just get pounded by the Carronade. Celestra's toolkit is composed of 2 summons, the Crab Summon, Damn Night Errant Summon, and of course Tide Call for AoE damage. For the Lizardman here, other than the Umbro Tide, there are some Koan Spear Riders, and as I said before, the Umbro Tide exposing themselves as now being pounded by the enemy Carronades. Other than that, a ton of skinks, first line of skink cohort, second line of red-crested skinks, and a third line of Koan Riders, some with spears, most of them without. Also one more lone unit of skink cohort there. Leading the army is a Forest Land, advancing through the tree line, dropping in a Burning Head onto some poor bombers, doing substantial damage, roasting through most of the HP of this unit. And I think that is basically the whole unit gone, as they're moving into crumbling territory, and it is really hard to get that leadership back up. They're just slowly fading away, and very patiently Sipa is just waiting for that bomber mob to die out, as the bombers can do some substantial damage to the red crested. The Burning Head even hit some pole arm zombie mob on the other side of the formation as well. Now, the secret ingredient of this skink rush are these two units. Chameleon Stalkers, you rarely see them because they are not that useful in the meta, but they do have stock, so they're sneaking up onto the enemy rear, getting into position, ready to pounce on these firing carronades. Just to stop the carronades from shooting, so the rest of the LZM army, the rest of the skinks, can advance out of the tree line and either rush down the enemies in melee or shoot them with missiles. Especially the Umbral Tide, they don't have a lot of range and they are hard countered by the carronades, so they need those artillery gone before they can get into firing position. Now, the first bomber mob has faded away. The second bomber mob is now targeted by a second burning head, taking half of their HP away, but at least it is not as bad as the first one, and their leadership should be able to recover in a few seconds. It also hits some of the handguns at the back there, and that is a very nice placement from Sipa there. Animated Hulks have moved up trying to brace for the enemy melee rush, but that means the backline is now exposed. Vampire Coast focusing on the front gives the Chameleon Stalkers the perfect opportunity to jump on those carronade crews. They're better melee combatants than your usual Chameleon skinks, so they are chewing through the HP of those carronades fast. Bound Banishment onto bomber mobs, doing even more damage, just trying to whittle down these anti-infantry firepower of the coast gun line. And the skink cores are pushing, and there are not enough melee units in the front line to stop everything from pushing through the gaps and hitting the handguns at the back. Some skinks already getting into the handguns. There's Silostra there dropping in a Damned Knight's Errant summon with the help of some bombers. These ones not touched by any spell damage at all, able to delete some Red Crested, and then the Damned Knight's Errant will be fighting some Coin Riders and Red Crested in melee as well. But with only one full strength bomber mob, the Vampire Coast really is struggling against the skink wave tactics. On the flank there, Animator Hulks duking it out against the Coin Spear Riders, and Coin Spear Riders feeling very comfortable in this fight with their anti-large bonus. There's also the Umbral Tide here, now that the carronades have been occupied. Otherwise, they are safe to just close in and start firing at the enemy handguns as well. And yeah, let us go back to normal speed here, as there's a lot of stuff happening at once. I had to go into slow-mo for a bit. Coin Spear Riders jumping onto those rotting Prometheans, and Animator Hosts should be able to get a good fight out of there. A couple of Red Crested skinks are still in the tree lines, chopping their way through some Animator Hosts and enemy chaff, and with the amount of LZM melee troops coming in, the Vampire Coast really struggling to contain those threats. More and more lizard units, the skinks and Coin Riders, are getting through the Vampire Coast defenses, compromising their gun line one by one. Another Burning Head, very well placed by Sipa. Some very, very deadly Burning Heads we've seen so far, deleting yet another unit of gunnery mob. They were turning around to fire at these Coin Riders who have been just walking around the entire backline, trying to get to the enemy rear, and this time they did manage to catch these handguns exposed. They have taken quite a bit of damage, but their shields mitigate some of those bullets and are now in melee combat, running down the enemy handguns, and that means these Umbral Tide are safe to start focusing down the Lamprey's Revenge with their fire damage and anti-large damage. Especially their fire damage can exploit that fire weakness imbued by the regeneration trait, and doing maximum amount of damage to the Lamprey's Revenge. And the Lamprey's Revenge having lowered vigor levels, they don't have the full armor to mitigate those anti-large shots. And at this point, it seems like this man has dominated the battlefield here. Red Crested pushing into melee combat against the rotting Prometheans there, and their armor piercing will slowly but surely hack down these armored monsters, especially with poison, debuffing the enemies. Coin Riders are still duking it out with some zombie mobs, and the rest of the zombie mobs are all otherwise occupied by some enemy skink melee units. The Animator Hulks in the forest here, earlier supported by their own zombie mobs, has lost the infantry support here. The Red Crested has chopped through those vampire chaff. Now they're just charging into some regular skinks for an easier fight. Lamprey's Revenge trying to hold the right flank, but they're still getting shot by those Umbral Tide from afar. The best way to deal with it usually is to fire back, but unfortunately the Vampire Coast has lost all their missile units. Some polearm mobs decided to come over and try to intercept these Umbral Tide, but there are some Chameleon Stalkers who have regrouped standing by, just sacrificing themselves to buy a bit more time for the Umbral Tide to shoot, and just keep working down the HP of these Lamprey's Revenge. A Tide call onto the Red Crested doing some decent damage, but not enough to rout them off. Also, there are some Damned Knight's Errant laying dead in the trees. I believe they were trying to hunt down the Slime Age Priest, but they were just not alive on the battlefield long enough to make that difference. Banishment onto the intercepted polearms mob, and they will be annihilated by Bound Spell. And at this point, the Vampire Coast has lost all their missile damage output, and the Lizardmen are in complete control. Only the Lamprey's Revenge is left on the battlefield, and they are now being lit up, very literally lit up by the Umbral Tide. And that shall be army losses, that shall be victory for the Lizardmen. Very well played from both players here, Sipa especially, those deadly burning heads and an excellent execution of a surround and rush using those rather unexpected chameleon stalkers. They're not the meta unit, so nobody ever expects them to jump on the enemy backline. Twister making the unfortunate mistake of focusing too much on the front there, not realizing that the LZM do have the stalking capabilities to disrupt their artillery from behind. Sipa managed to shut down the carronades, and then the Umbral Tide were able to close in and start lighting up the enemy formations, while the rest of the skink front line there, 10 whole units of skinks rushing through the gaps of the enemy melee deckhand mobs and getting onto the rather fragile underbelly of the Vampire Coal's gun line. Koan Cavalry also did okay here, either charging into enemy gun lines or duking it out against undead monstrosities. But yeah, most of the value were procured by the Slam Mage Priest of Fire with all those burning heads, some very deadly burning heads, deleting multiple gunline units, and the Salamander hunting pack lighting up the rather expensive Rotting Prometheans. And of course, the 2 chameleon stalkers responsible for shutting down the enemy long-range fire as well. The deckhand mobs didn't do a whole lot, they were just trying to buy time for the gunline to shoot, but unfortunately, 2 of these bombers were just deleted by Burning Head and Banishment, though the 3rd bomber mob was able to earn back their valor and then some more. Handguns were disrupted by the sheer number of enemy melee units and the animated hulks not getting a whole lot of damage as well. Same for the gun crabs and the carronades, as most of their gunline has been shut down by just really sheer amount of melee troops jumping onto them, unable to fire for most of the combat. And yeah, that's all for today's double cast of Vampire Coast battles. I hope you all enjoyed this multiplayer video, and if you want to see more similar content of Total War Warhammer 3 multiplayer, specifically Conquest or Land Battles, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.